Canada emerged from the global financial meltdown as a bastion of economic health and prudent planning compared to others. But oil has slipped, recession has crept in, and things don't appear as rosy today. Joining us now for their evaluation of the health of Canada's economy, in London, Ontario, Mike Moffat, Assistant Professor in the Business, Economics and Public Policy Group at Western University's Ivey School of Business. And here in studio, Jim Stanford, Senior Economist with Unifor, the trade union. It's good to have you two both back on our program. Mike, to you first. How significant, in your view, is the drop of oil prices to the overall health of the Canadian economy today?
Oh, it's substantial. We've now got an economy in recession, at least by one definition of the term. We are seeing economic weakness in Saskatchewan that's running a deficit for the first time in a while. Alberta's hurting, and Newfoundland and Labrador is particularly suffering. So overall, this has taken billions and billions out of the economy, caused all kinds of problems that we're seeing in people's pensions. We're feeling it in the Canadian dollar, and as well as have taken billions of dollars out of the federal government's coffers, which is leading all of the parties to have to make some difficult decisions.
Jim, how about you on that?
Likewise, there's no doubt the pain that we're feeling from lower oil reflects the kind of structural remaking of Canada's economy over the last decade. We have become much more reliant on petroleum extraction and other kind of raw and resource extraction. And that means when the prices come down, and they always come down, you know, anyone who thought the price of oil could only go one way was obviously ignoring history. So when it came back down, we were left more exposed, and we are feeling those side effects.
Can I do a little follow-up, Jim, with you on the question I asked Elena as well? You know, if people go to the gas pumps and it costs a lot less to buy gas than it used to, say, a year and a half ago, or if they're taking a flight and airlines are paying so much less for fuel now than they would have a year and a half ago, I mean, theoretically, that's good for the economy.
Oh, certainly. There are some benefits as well as costs. It isn't a one-way street. Consumers benefit on lower energy prices. Energy-using industries, you mentioned transportation, but there's other industries. Some manufacturers, for example, are very energy-intensive. They're experiencing big savings on the cost side. So there are some benefits. The silver lining in the cloud, of course, is what the oil price has meant for the Canadian dollar, which has made everything we sell in the rest of the world, manufacturers, services, tourism, much more appealing. Look at our tourism numbers, finally turning around after a dismal decade. So there are some positives, but on a net basis, it's clear that the harm has outweighed the good so far.
Mike, you agree with that? On a net basis, the harm outweighs the good?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there had been some discussion around this point, but we saw the Bank of Canada weigh in on that, and they're saying in their structural models that you know, the downside, what it means for the oil and gas industry, outweighs the benefits to manufacturing, to some of our service exports, to tourism, which isn't much of a surprise because we are a net exporter of oil, and generally speaking, anything that you sell, if the price of that goes down, that's a bad thing for you.
You know, Steve, one industry which uses oil as an input is oil refining. Obviously, duh, you don't need a PhD in economics to realize that. But the refining and processing business has become enormously profitable, while the production side is obviously suffering. And one of the reasons that I think we're experiencing that net negative is precisely because we have not taken advantage of our own energy to do more refining and processing here in Canada. We've actually become a net importer of refined petroleum products, if you can believe that. So that possible upside is one that I think we've kind of squandered.
Mike, the joy of being in the middle of a very long election campaign right now is that it has actually given Canadians a bit of an opportunity, I suspect, to discuss at the kitchen table how much of an impact any government can actually have in improving the economy. And we've seen various, you know, the parties have all got their plans out there for doing just that. But let me ask you the question. How much can a government do to actually significantly improve the economic health of any country at any particular time?
Well, there's not much they can do in the short run. So governments always take far too much credit when things are going well, which this government was wont to do, and take far too much blame when things are going poorly. That if we had this election 18 months ago, regardless of who would have won that election, they'd be going through these difficulties. What the federal government can do and should do is make plans that go 5, 10, 15 years down the line to strengthen the long-run growth of the economy, but they don't control the day-to-day price of oil or what's going on in China or anything like that.
None of the parties on offer, though, Jim, can worry about 5 years from now right now. They're worried about 5 weeks from now, because that's when Election Day is happening. You've seen the plans that are out there. Can governments actually do anything substantive to improve the health of the economy right now?
Oh, absolutely they can. I mean, I accept Mike's point. You can't push a button.
In the short run?
You can't push a button and change something tomorrow, but you can have even short-run impacts through your own decisions on matters like budgeting, taxes, how much you're spending on different government programs. And one of the reasons we are weak in Canada, one of the reasons we were on the edge anyway, even before the oil price fell, and that did tip us into recession, was because government, particularly the federal level, had been in strong austerity mode for the previous couple of years before that, downsizing, laying off lots of workers, cutting the amount that they're pumping into the economy, and that is one of the precipitating factors that created this recession. So how they respond, I think, does make a difference, even more so in the long run. But remember, the government writ large at all levels makes up about a third of our total economy, so you can't say that they're powerless. And of course, the policies that they put in place that govern the private sector are also important down the road.
Okay, you can't say they're powerless, but Mike, you've heard that Justin Trudeau, the leader of the Liberals, has on offer as part of his platform the option of going into deficit for the next few years in order to, in his view, kickstart some added infrastructure programs, because he thinks that will be an important way to improve the economic health of the country. And I guess my question is, let's say he runs a $10 billion deficit annually to the year 2019. Can $40 billion or $60 billion, which I think is what he's got on offer, of extra spending in a $2 trillion economy really have any impact at all?
Well, it certainly moves the needle somewhat. And to sort of back up this conversation, I've been saying since budget day of 2015 that I've been of the opinion that we are going to be running deficits in the foreseeable future, no matter what happens. Budget 2015 put the price of oil for next year's price of oil at $67 a barrel. Last week, Goldman Sachs said that they're predicting it's going to be $45 a barrel US, could be as low as 20. So that's going to take billions of dollars out of federal coffers that needs to be made up somehow. So, you know, I've long been of the opinion we're going to be running a deficit anyway. Whether that's $5, $10 billion, overall debt to GDP would be going down. It has a stimulus effect, but only to a point. I think where it's more important is if that infrastructure money is well spent, and that's a big if, that can have dividends down the road, that our manufacturers will be able to get their goods to market in a much better way. You know, social housing pays dividends, so that kind of thing. So I think that's, in the long run, more important that this infrastructure money be well spent.
We're in an interesting, maybe unprecedented situation here now, Jim, where the Liberals are saying they want to spend $60 billion going into deficit for the next few years, which Mike Moffat just said he forecast is going to happen regardless, in order to do some infrastructure spending. The NDP, conversely, has said our first budget will be balanced come hell or high water. A bit of a differing of roles here. Who's right on the economics on this?
I thought hell or high water was Paul Martin's
It was his expression. Yes, it was.
So that tells you how things have changed. Well, first of all, to Mike's point that we are in deficit, that's absolutely correct. In fact, we're in deficit this year. The government is pretending that they have a balanced budget. They did a number of one-time accounting changes to try and get to a nominal budget, but a nominal budget balance. But the true situation is clearly one of deficit that normally would get worse. The only way for a government to stop it from getting worse when the economy is in a recession or even just a bad slowdown is to either cut spending or increase taxes, both of which worsens the recession. So it totally shoots yourself in the foot. And the government could clearly run deficits of much bigger than what Mr. Trudeau is proposing, and yet still have the debt to GDP ratio falling. Now, to understand why the NDP has adopted this, remember the NDP has their own infrastructure spending promises, which are pretty hefty as well and would have similar benefits as the ones that Mr. Trudeau has spoken of. Politically, they have made the judgment that, you know, they have to prove to Canadians that they're not going to bankrupt the country. So I think it's all about politics, not economics, that have driven them to that particular position.
Understood. Let me do a little follow-up here with you, Mike, based on the discussion we had with the three in the previous segment, and that is, you heard this criticism that Stephen Harper hasn't done enough to champion the diversification of the Canadian economy, that he's tended to put all of his eggs in the energy sector basket. Fair criticism?
Yeah, I think that's one that can be overstated, that the federal government did do a number of things to, say, help manufacturers. So we had the auto bailouts. We had elimination of tariffs on manufacturing inputs. It's something that doesn't get spoken a lot, but I know manufacturers appreciate that. But I think there is something to the criticism, and I think it's most telling in our international relations that we had the government, when they go down to the United States, whether it be Prime Minister Harper, whether it be some of his ministers, go to the United States, and it was all about Keystone. We heard Keystone, Keystone, Keystone all over. But there were a lot of other issues going on that we didn't hear scream from the rooftop, like border delays is a big one for our exporters, particularly here in southwestern Ontario. The Buy American, which I know Jim probably has a lot of views on, heard a lot of our manufacturers in this region. We didn't hear as much of a discussion from the Canadian government when they were in Washington on these issues. So I think there was a bit of a tell on these foreign relations issues.
Jim, your view on that?
I think of, in a way, two categories, Steve. I think of sins of commission that the government did in this regard. There were ways which they clearly added gasoline to the fire while the commodity bubble was on the way up. Liberalizing and approving a whole bunch of foreign takeovers that really drove up the value of the Canadian dollar, regulatory favors for the oil industry to accelerate development, corporate tax cuts that again made it all the more lucrative. So in some ways they actually added to the upswing, which was unsustainable anyway. Then there's sins of omission, where the government did not do things that I think would have been prudent to try and, in a way, lean against the winds. You know, for sure, it was a global phenomenon, this rise in the oil price and the commodity boom. But we should know enough from our own history as Canadians that we have to be more than people who just dig stuff out of the ground and sell it to others, that generally ends in tears, and it has again. So there were things that they could have done to try and insulate Canada's economy from an overheated resource sector and to proactively protect not just manufacturing, that's crucial, but tradable services which have declined, our tourism, as I mentioned, the infrastructure investments which we could have benefited from as well.
Mike, we remember in the late 1980s the great debates over free trade with the United States. We're now in the 21st century, and the great debate is over the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I guess a lot of people thought we would have signed by now. We haven't. How come?
Well, I think there's a lot of issues still outstanding, a lot that don't have anything to do with us, but some of which that do, around pharmaceutical rights and intellectual property rights. A big one for us is we've never really gotten around this question of how much are we willing to protect supply management. If supply management is non-negotiable, I don't really see how a TPP gets done. But you know, at the same time, I don't know the federal government's attitude, or frankly any party's attitude or willingness to make significant cuts to supply management. And furthermore, you know, we're still waiting for CETA to be signed. So we have the sort of the ink to dry on CETA. So we still have these deals that we don't entirely know what they're going to look like, or if they're even going to happen at all.
And remind us, CETA stands for?
It's the Canadian-European trade deal. I can't remember what the A is.
Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement.
Right.
There we go.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
I figured between the three of us, one of us would come up with
the
the
acronym.
There we go.
I always think it's Canadian-European Trade Agreement, but Jim is absolutely correct. It's comprehensive, not.
Now, Mike, is he absolutely correct on everything on this program, or just on that?
Let's say yes, Mike.
I'm sure
Blank
we can.
check, please.
Jim and I have been disagreeing about things for about 10 years, so I'm sure we haven't entirely closed the gap.
Although we agree more often than is good for either of our careers, Mike, I suggest.
It's hurting both of our reputations, no question.
Jim, let me get you on TPP. I think Mike is right, the supply management issue. Anybody who wants to win seats in Quebec over the next 5 weeks cannot throw supply management under the bus, and that's a problem.
Supply management has already been thrown under the bus. That's what I'm told by folks who get the gossip from the trade tables. I think the Canadians gave up most of the supply management at that meeting in Hawaii, but the government, for obvious political reasons, doesn't want to talk about it. Now there's another hot potato that's arisen around TPP, and that's the auto content requirements. Japan and the United States cut a side deal that Canada and Mexico were not privy to that would substantially reduce the amount of content in a part or a vehicle that arises within the free trade TPP zone. And that could have potentially devastating impact on North American parts suppliers who would now face imports from China, Thailand, and elsewhere that would still be considered part of the TPP production chain. So it's a very complicated issue, and it's another one where Canadian industry officials have expressed real alarm. So I know the Conservatives would love to hold up a piece of paper before October 19th saying, look, we signed the deal, trust us. Although, as Mike says, they've done that before with the CETA, and we still actually don't have a deal. But they don't want to talk about the details, either on supply management or on the automotive issue. So it's going to be very complicated politics. Similarly, the Liberals and the NDP have their own political imperatives. They both want to be seen as pro-trade, but without signing on to every deal in a whole process, which so far has been very secretive.
The Harper government, Mike, actually did, I think a few weeks or a few days ago, did hold up a piece of paper saying we've actually negotiated more than 100 trade deals, and the Liberals, when they were in power during the Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin years, did fewer than 10. And therefore, we're the party that you can trust to get a good trade agreement with whoever. The facts are unambiguously clear that they've negotiated more trade deals. Have they been better trade deals for Canada?
Well, I think a lot of them have been largely inconsequential. So yes, you know, we can sign a trade deal with a small Central American nation, and that I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but that doesn't really push the needle too much. If you look at trade flows, that most of our trade happens with the United States. You know, Mexico's in the top 5. Just out of sheer geography. So NAFTA is always going to be our most important relationship. And again, I think there's been issues there that our government and the American government over the last few years haven't been able to play nice with each other. And that's not necessarily the fault of our government, but that is issues. And as you know, Jim has pointed out many times before, you look at our export numbers in the NAFTA zone, and they've been declining substantially over the last 10 years.
Do the Conservatives, Jim, in your view, get some credit for the fact that they've negotiated all of these many trade agreements around the world?
No, I think Mike's point is valid about what kinds of agreements, and even just getting an agreement doesn't necessarily mean your trade is going to improve. You know, I think because of the politicization of the trade debate that we've had in Canada over the last generation, we tend to think of trade and free trade agreements as being the same thing, but they're not. Let me give you an example. The most recent trade agreement which was actually implemented was with Korea, came into effect on January the 1st. Lots of promises, as usual, about new exports, new jobs for Canada. We've got 7 months of data on this new deal. Canada's exports to Korea are down 7% under free trade. Hooray, we got a free trade agreement. Our imports are up. The Koreans have banned Canadian beef, which was supposed to be the big winner. So here's a situation where our trade with Korea, as with many other countries, has deteriorated under this government.
Do we know why?
Oh, all kinds of reasons. Low commodity prices. We've become exporters. What Korea wants from us is our coal and our aluminum and our wood pulp, and prices for all those things have fallen. The Korean market is kind of structurally closed, so just signing a free trade agreement doesn't mean they're going to start buying our stuff. That's a lesson we need to keep in mind when we're dealing with Japan as well, which has a similar setup. And the fact that we have not built, this is the key problem, we haven't built in Canada the firms and the industries that produce innovative, high-value stuff that the rest of the world wants. And that's the reason, not a lack of free trade agreements, that our exports have performed so poorly over the last decade.
Let me show you both a couple of charts here that do talk about the rest of the world, Jim, as you just put it. Canada, the United States, China, and the United Kingdom. Sheldon, can we see these graphs here? If you want to take a look at the GDP growth of those 4 countries, China, of course, doing very well over the last 5 years, but you see that top line begin to decline. On the other hand, Canada, a decline around 2012, but then starting to nudge back up in the right direction. Pretty flat for the other 2 countries as well, the United States and the United Kingdom. We have one more chart to show. This is the unemployment rate, and we can see 5 years ago, Canada had a pretty dramatically better unemployment rate than the U.S. or the UK. Well, a little higher than the UK, but better than the U.S. But as time has gone on, towards 2014, we're still lower than the other countries, but just marginally so. Let's get into some discussion in our remaining few moments here about the significance of these numbers. Mike, what do you draw from these charts that you think is important?
Well, cross-country comparisons of unemployment rate are always a little bit difficult, partly just because every country has sort of different economic circumstances, and partly because you have differences in definitions of unemployment. But I think Canada certainly has an issue around unemployment and has a bit of a mismatch between the types of skills that we've been training people for and the jobs that are needed. So, you know, another way that we've seen the federal government really go kind of all in on oil is the fact that we've had all of this money go into apprenticeship grants for things like pipe fitters, electricians, you know, all of these jobs that are needed on the oil patch. But we've got companies across southwestern Ontario, service exporters like tech firms that can't find skilled workers because there's just not the job training available for that. And the federal government could play a role there. So I do think a better federal policy, and this is something I'd like to see discussed more across all of the parties, I think could help nudge down that unemployment rate somewhat.
Jim, your organization, I think, teamed up with a bunch of others to put out a very entertaining video, although the content of the video was rather distressing, about the Harper government's economic performance during its time in office. And you, I think, looked at 16 different metrics and came to the conclusion that his shepherding of the economy was the worst in how many years?
Since World War II, actually,
World War II.
In the post-war era.
Now, I mean, everybody knows the economy has been pretty terrible since the meltdown back in 2008. How much of the blame does Stephen Harper get for those numbers, and how much of it is factors beyond his control?
Oh, a bit of both, for sure. It wasn't all clearly his government's fault. There were global things that were happening. Although I will point out that previous post-war governments in Canada had some global things happening as well, including wars, OPEC price shocks, terrorist attacks in the U.S., and many recessions. This recession that we had under Mr. Harper's watch, well, we've actually had two now, are just 2 of 11 that we've had since the end of the Second World War. So I think that in a way, our goal there was to try and point out that the overstated boasts, if you like, that the government has been making, that Canada is the best in the world, that claim is not remotely true. We aren't even in the top half of OECD countries now, and that their management is the reason why everything's gone well. Those claims, which I think were overstated at the best of times, today just ring hollow.
Has he done anything well?
Oh, has the government done anything well? Well,
tell me one thing the Harper government has done well on the economic file.
On the economic file. Wow, you're really putting me on the spot.
Come on, you can think of one.
Their immediate reaction during the 2008-2009 recession was appropriate and was consistent with what other countries were doing. The emergency money that was pumped into the banking system, the support for the auto industry, and some of the short-term make-work projects that they did. That helped. Problem was they took their foot off the gas and put it on the brakes as soon as they got their majority government in 2011.
See, I knew you could do it.
There.
I knew you could do it. And do you want to give me one criticism, Mike, that you think the Harper government has earned over the last 9 years?
Well, I think largely that the government's played a lot of triage. So it's kind of dealt with the sort of, okay, something happened, sort of let's deal with this. I don't really know how much the structure of the Canadian economy has changed for the better over 9 or 10 years. It really feels like a bit of a lost opportunity to me that, you know, are we better off than we were in 2005? I'm not really sure that we are.
Gentlemen, you did agree a bit, and that's okay, but it's a nice contrast of views on our program, as you always do. Mike Moffat, Jim Stanford, good of you to join us tonight on TVO. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.